Claris Talk AI.
Cris Hippolyte.
Matt Navarre.
Hey, Matt, what year is it by
It is
you?
still 2025.
Oh, so we still have some time for
For some
our.
hours.
Well, actually, it's interesting that we're teetering on the brink here because we can spend time today looking back on 2025 and maybe even peeking forward into 2026 and
Yep.
maybe, making some projections, which I believe we did last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we did, and we'll be taking a
Oh,
look at
good.
that.
Ooh, fun. Well, I'll tell you what, I have well, yes, so you're in Greece, just so in case anyone's
Right.
not up to speed.
So
I'm
6
in
p.m. where I
California.
am,
Okay, gotcha. So
and
we have
8
plenty of
8
time.
a.m. where you are.
Oh, yep,
Yep.
perfect. So we have plenty of time. So we don't need to get into 2026. We can still faithfully make our projections about 2026 without cheating into 2026.
This is true.
Um, I'll tell you an interesting place for us to start today, I think might be with this sort of, I don't know if this is going to be a pattern moving forward, but for those of you that are just listening, I'm showing Matt a couple of, actually a whole bunch of papers that have come out over the last 3 weeks or so. And they're all really interesting. Like, for example, this one here is OpenAI's 2025 State of Enterprise AI report. This was actually from the folks at Microsoft AI. It's about time. It's called the Copilot usage report from
Hmm.
2025.
Hmm.
These are all these. It might be a little bit creepy, and this is Perplexity adoption and usage of AI agents, early evidence from Perplexity, and two
Harvard.
more. Yeah, there's Harvard University and Perplexity did that one, and then there's a Pew Research, PEW Research, like pews at a
Hmm.
church,
Hmm.
on teens and technology. I thought this was kind of interesting since
Yeah,
that's
oh
sort of
yeah.
a harbinger of where things are going.
Ooh, I really want to look
Um,
at some of those sets of numbers there. Some really interesting tables
oh
on the
yeah,
first page.
and then finally the last one that we're going to be sort of summarizing and taking a look at is estimating AI productivity gains from Claude conversations. Now, what do all these have in common? Well, they're all from providers, well, except for the Pew Research one, they're all from organizations that make chatbots, which is essentially, at least today, kind of the main line of how consumers are working with AI. Now, just to frame this up, these are not necessarily just business use cases. And while we generally talk about business use cases of AI, it's worth noting that this is the full birth of what people are actually using AI for. And it breaks it down into a bunch of different categories. And I thought it would be kind of fun for us to look at these, pull some really interesting stats out of this, and actually maybe even find out a little bit about how you may have been using AI, using some of these same terminology.
Yeah, yeah.
And we'll link to these papers in the show notes. By the way, we'll make sure to get that over to folks. As a matter of fact, I'm sending this to Matt right now. As a matter of fact, just so I don't forget. So, what do you think about this, Matt? Are you creeped out that they're actually tracking? They were all very careful to mention that they anonymized all these conversations for the purposes of just aggregating, the data and.
Of course. I mean, I don't feel at all creeped out by it because I mean, it's you're taking hundreds of millions uh, of things, and
Yeah, as a
probably
matter of
only for the people who say yes, you can, use my stuff because there's a
Yeah,
checkbox for that.
probably. Yeah,
Um,
to speak specifically to that, one of the biggest data sets is actually from the Microsoft Copilot team. They analyzed 37.5 million, they call it de-identified conversations,
hmm.
which is January through just September. So they've been crunching these numbers in September. Um, and so really this one is probably a little bit wider of a use case because this is Copilot, which is integrated into all their products, whereas the rest of these, like, Perplexities, I guess, kind of a product, even though it's, a search engine, for example. So what I guess I have the top six. I have the top three. I'm sorry, the top three conversation topics and the top three intents, which is what people were trying to do
Yeah.
when they were doing this. What do you think your top three conversation topics would be?
Oh
Just like
my
one word
God.
categories.
Well, I spend a lot of time on Greek, learning Greek, Greek
Oh,
history,
I like it.
like um, researching and understanding the etymology of words, which is super fascinating
Mm.
because so much of English comes from that. And that makes it a lot easier to learn. That's one huge area. Got another area is just like life, health, dogs, uh, drug interactions for the 17 diseases I was hospitalized for. I'm just kidding.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
like just a ton of things. No, I'm all good.
Well,
So, but a ton of things like that, like,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think
from,
you got your finger on the pulse here, buddy. Like that's really what people seem to be
yeah,
using
everything
these
from
things
like
for.
cooking to health to, just really, really basic life stuff, not tech. And then the third
Well,
area, which is actually probably not number three, is everything I'm doing to learn about AI and FileMaker and integrations and API integrations and how things are evolving and how to change this code and all the things I had to learn for the switching from the chat to the responses AI endpoint
mm-hmm.
and how fabulous that change was.
Nice.
Um,
Well, and that's tech though. That would fall under
that's
tech. And I
tech. Yeah,
only and
I'd say those are the three groups. Yeah.
so you would say health, fitness, tech, and then
Language,
like
learning.
language. Okay. So you're right there with folks. So number one with the bullet, and again, this is just the Microsoft Copilot team. So
Mhm.
for those of you that want to check out this paper in the show notes,
Cats.
you
Number
can
one had
dive
to be
deeper into it.
cats, right?
Uh, this isn't YouTube. Yeah, otherwise it would be. Number one is in fact technology. So, and again, think about this. This is Copilot, so
Yeah.
it's probably got some coding built in there too.
Yeah, I bet.
Number two is work and career, kind of
Hmm.
a general topic, but that's number two. And then number three, you're right there, health and fitness. And I think there's a bit of a common theme about health and fitness. And I think that's really interesting that so much of us are relying on that. I certainly am. I have a personal context and a project set up just for my health. And I use ChatGPT for that all the time. And then
Yeah.
in addition, the top intents. Now the topics versus intents are different. Intent means, like I'm searching on a topic, but this is what I'm trying to do, for example. Number one, kind of unsexy, searching for information, kind of a duh, because that's people are, supplanting their Googling habits
Yeah.
with ChatGPT or whatever
Yeah.
their
I
flavor
don't.
is.
I almost never use
Um,
Google anymore.
Me neither.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I I have a hard time even using it as a verb when I'm even talking about ChatGPT, but
That
just accidentally
doesn't have
saying
the same verb right now, but yeah.
no. I know it's weird. It definitely doesn't work. But searching for information, getting advice, which is interesting.
Hmm.
That's the number two ranked intent, and then creating, and that's obviously a
Mm-hmm.
very vast, large berth of an intent there. So in general, it looks like at least from the Copilot folks. People are using or in 2025 it helped them find things, help them decide things, and help them produce a first draft of things. It's not glamorous, it's not AGI, but it's kind of like a hey, just help me think a little bit better type approach. Your thoughts?
I'm kind of right there with that. Those all totally ring true with me and with what I would expect use would be for all of that. I guess I'm curious. You know what I would also say? I think that's not going to change.
Yeah, that's probably not going to change.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's going
yeah.
to take different forms, but it's not going to change much, right?
So I guess
Because
we could loosely make that a projection that if these same things come out next year, that we both don't expect that these categories and intents would change that much.
yeah, well, I mean, just like for health stuff, as we get older, tracking things that didn't seem that important. Actually, I'll throw one thing out. I'm going to throw my one book recommendation out
Hmm.
that I think is super important, and I strongly recommend to everyone. And it's called Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia. And it's if there's a must-read book, it's that. I don't want to try to be all, not tech bro, but like health bro, keto diet, all that stuff. But basically, he's talking a lot about not just aging well, not
Hmm.
longevity, but like health. He doesn't call it healthgevity, but it's something like that. Basically, um, having a lot of strength to be able to do the things that you want to do when you're older. He talks about a centenarian decathlon, like
Oh, so like
plan for the kind of bone density and strength and blood pressure and all the other things that you need to have if you want to be able to like play with your grandkids when you're 90
Well,
Start
isn't that
planning
the
when you're
same thing
30.
you do financially? Like it's the same advice.
Yeah.
So if you want to be able to retire, then, make decisions
Yeah.
now that will help you there. So yeah, I get
Yep.
that. And it sounds like that's probably something that you'll be using your chatbots for to dive into your healthgevity a
Yeah.
little bit as you move forward. Well,
Of
duly
course.
noted, and we should put that in the show notes as well too. A nice little link for people.
Yeah. Yeah. We
And
should. Yeah. And he also has a podcast that talks a lot about it. He gets very, very deep into it. But it's just basically it's balance and it's thinking about things that you hadn't really thought of before, like your metabolic rates and what your VO2 max is, and some stats like if you're in the top quartile of of strength in really basic ways, you're like 30% less likely to die of all cause mortality when you're in your 80s. I mean, the stats are just insane. And he really goes into the data. Anyway, I'll get off that topic. But what I have done is I've made a custom GPT with all of his information that you can get, and then talking about like what my goals are, what I want to do, what my numbers are, what blood test results I've had, blah blah blah.
and you can create, yeah, you can just create conversations in there, or create one big conversation that you keep coming back to,
Yep.
so that you have that conversational memory that is guided by that as context, because you can upload the entire book if you wanted
Yep.
to, or if it's available on PDF,
Yeah.
and then just speak against it. I did something similar to like with this like Harvard study on EQ, and I just sort of like am using it mostly in voice mode. I found myself kind of using a lot of voice mode for like, I don't know, like just therapeutic reasons, I guess. I guess
Yeah.
is probably the right way to call it. And I just have it as a little desktop companion now. Like literally, like, hey, how would I navigate, this work scenario?
Great, Chris.
If
Let me know
if
if there's
was
anything
more
else I can help
balanced.
you with. Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
Got to be able to turn
yeah.
that stuff off. But anyway.
Well, you gotta, yeah, you do have to get past like but I think the thing is though, like, actually, I'm not going to say it. I think if you're using your AI as a therapist, you don't have to get past the fact that it's not a human. I think that we have to actually get past that human therapists are human and just sort of be like, all right, this person's not going to go tell everybody my secrets, or
Yep.
they're probably broken too. Like, you don't have to think about all that stuff. You just kind of
Right.
regurgitate it. And so, I think I believe that is what we're talking about or they're talking about when they talk about health and fitness as well too. Although this next part actually is a little bit interesting. The Microsoft one went a little bit deeper. I think you'll find this fascinating. It actually broke down how AI behaves like two different products, is what they said. Desktop versus phone. So I've often said, like even when we're talking about building FileMaker applications in my training classes, I used to talk about how important it was to have, to identify who your users are, not just for gatekeeping, but for the purposes of, well, actually, come to think of it, establishing the context of who this person is and where they might want to go. Of course, those are the things that were meaningful. I feel the same way in AI applications to provide context of users so that the responses from language models can be consistent. But what I used to say in that is that Cris, like we have this one system that we use at iSolutions that we run everything on. When I'm logging in via my phone, I'm doing very different things and often have very different goals than when I log in on an iPad or let's say a desktop,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And that just makes sense to us. And so this study actually addressed that from a chatbot perspective too. And so Microsoft didn't just ask people what they do with AI, they asked how it changes by device and by time of day, actually. So they found that mobile looks fundamentally different from desktop use, probably not a surprise based on what we both agreed on a second ago. But on mobile, health and fitness is the dominant topic. So kind of when people are in their fitness activities or health activities or about to eat something or whatever,
Right.
it stays dominant. And it stays dominant across every hour and every month that they observed. Now, on the desktop, the workday, as you can imagine, really, impacts their data. So between 8 o'clock and 5 p.m. work and career overtakes technology as the topic. So technology actually, maybe for you and I, might be our work day, most common topic. But for some, it's work and career, and then technology is after. So kind of interesting, huh?
Yeah, and as I think about it, I hadn't really thought about the distinction, but totally it's there.
They said this interesting phrase. AI is, quote, a colleague at their desk and a confidant in their pocket. Kind of
Yeah,
marketing speaky, but I thought that was
makes
kind of
sense.
interesting.
Yeah, I also
Um,
pretty much I use the ChatGPT app on my phone, but not necessarily the one on my computer because the website gives you a richer experience on the
it
computer.
does. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned that because, like, sometimes I use one of my pro tips is sometimes if I lose the thread in the conversational memory, I will intentionally go back into the timeline and I'll edit one of my instructions, and then you just hit save, and then what it does is it erases everything that came after that from the conversational memory if things start to get a little noisy. And so yeah, I find that often the edit option isn't even available on the desktop app, and if I
Yeah.
just simply go into the web app, for example, it is. So kind of
Yep.
a
Yep.
pro
Yep.
tip, two pro tips there maybe for
I'll
folks.
give you a pro tip.
Hey,
One of the tools that you get on the iPhone version is the Apple Music tool.
oh, I saw that. I was trying to figure out how to actually. I
Dude,
saw something online about that.
it allows you to query the whole world of songs and say, I want a playlist by such and such of an artist that's this, or I'm just trying to find some, is vastly, vastly better than what you can get like in Apple
Well,
Music.
I think I accidentally used that just yesterday because yesterday was my 1 year anniversary of when we first brought our dog Pax into our house, and so I did a 1 year retrospective that I
Mm,
sent to the foster family and the shelter people to just make them happy and look at how much he's blossomed and all that. But I needed the right song, and
yeah,
so I went into ChatGPT and I said, "Well, look, here's my situation. This is what
yeah.
I'm doing. I don't need it to be about a dog, and it just gave me just layers and layers of all these songs. And then I could click on it. It actually went to a preview. And then from that preview, I could go into Apple Music and it would launch it on my computer and listen. So it was perfect. And you know what we're talking about? Stuff that Siri should be doing,
Yes, without
basically.
question.
I mean,
Yeah.
what are we doing? Come on,
Yeah,
Siri.
I
Like,
used to.
that's so easy.
I'm a nerd about classical music, choral music especially, and I just wanted to test it out the first time I tried it. I said, "Give me the top five amazing choral pieces of all time," and one or two that I knew about, and then like the number one was a piece that I've known and sung, but it was a version from a choir I've never heard of, and oh my God, is just absolutely perfect recording, just
You're going to be so
spine
proud of me
tingling.
because I just bought tickets yesterday to go see a organ performance, at the Disney
Yeah,
Walt
not
Disney
not
concert hall
proud of
here.
you, but go ahead.
And I'm very excited about it, mostly because I'm obsessed with the movie Interstellar, and that Hans Zimmer theme just like is a religious experience for me when I listen to it.
Yeah,
And I thought, what
for
the heck, I'm
sure.
gonna go listen to something like this live. And I've never heard actual like pipe organs really going live,
Yeah.
and so at least it's getting me to a concert hall. But maybe AI didn't help me
You know,
find that.
having the experience of having an organ in a concert hall or in a church is pretty amazing because there's so
I've never
much, like
experienced it.
there's a direction of every single pipe. They're all in different places. The bass shakes the room with those big 32-foot,
Well, that I will bring
pipes.
it into AI because I said to AI, "Hey, look, these are the seats that are available." So obviously, I want to be down on the floor where all the VIP tickets are that are more expensive, and they're like, "No,
Yeah,
pipe organs have nothing to do with directional. They're not coming at you.
right.
They literally said go on the side, go about halfway up into the
Yeah,
cheap seats, and sit there because it's actually filling it in from the roof down and like creating this thickness of sound." And I'm like, "Oh, perfect." So it literally gave me the exact section and what like range of rows and saved me like $100, frankly.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
thanks AI. And
Okay.
maybe another thing that Siri could do. So here we are. Let's see. We've just talked about our aging
Yeah, I
and
know.
how we want to be healthy when we're 80
Yep,
and church stuff and
yep.
orchestral music. How about
And
we
I
find out
can't tell.
what the
We can do that, but I have one more nerd thing to show about pipe organs, right?
Oh,
Okay, so
okay,
toccata
please.
fugue in D minor. Da 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 da. Da, right, like a super famous Bach piece. Okay, it's in D.
The is that the
It's
Halloweeny
for everything.
is it? Okay, all right.
Yeah, it's just been ever. So it's in D, and the lowest note on the foot pedals is a C. Pretty much on a lot of keyboards, it's like that.
Hmm.
And if you play the D and the C together, the two lowest notes, which wouldn't be a good sound because they're next to each other, at the very, very low end of foot pedals, you can't really hear the dissonance, but this undertone beneath that mathematically is the D an octave below.
Interesting.
The room shakes, man.
Really?
Yeah, so
Oh,
you're
I can't
basically
wait.
it's creating a note that the organ can't play by using a mathematic waveguide type thing, not a waveguide type thing, but anyway.
Oh,
Who knows
see,
if
I'm
they'll even do that,
fascinated.
but this is the kind of stuff that's amazing.
Dude, I'm seriously, I'm so
Yeah,
I'm into this. I get it. I'm a tourist
yeah,
here in this type of music, but give me that, and I look forward to sharing
yeah.
my experience with you.
And your
And
recorded organ music, I just can't. It's just you lose so much compared to being
yeah,
in
and
the
it's still
room.
moving to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna go see a particular pipe organist who will in fact play the Interstellar theme, and I know that's
Ah,
very like commercial
yeah.
of me, but I can't wait, and it
Do it. Hey, whatever gets
might
you in
make
there.
me misty-eyed. Now
Um,
here we are sounding like a couple of serious old dudes right
yeah.
now. Why don't we try to figure out what the kids are up to when it comes to AI? As a matter of
Okay.
fact, one
More
of those
papers?
papers, yeah, that paper that I showed you from the Pew Research Center actually surveyed about 1,400 U.S. teens, specifically between the ages of 13 and 17. This was,
Cheers.
cheers indeed. This was between September 25th and October 9th. And really the idea is, what are the kids doing? This is a bit of a harbinger of,
Hmm.
what young adults will do and then adults and so on.
Yeah.
And here's what they found.
So curious.
64% of teens say that they use an AI chatbot. So 64%, over two thirds. It's interesting.
Hmm.
And when you look at frequency, you get this really interesting.
It's under two-thirds. Two-thirds is 66. We'll let that go.
Oh, it's just under 2%. Damn. And teens would probably know that as well. And so when you look at frequency, 4% of all teens say that they use chatbots, quote unquote, almost constantly. 12 say several times a day, and another 12% say about once a day. So that's roughly 28% of these teens are using AI daily. So it's like this would I assume get into the new normal type range here, and ChatGPT is the
Yeah.
top brand among teens, saying that
Hmm.
59% of teens use ChatGPT. So when adults say kids are doing everything with AI, well, I guess in fact they are. Is this surprising to you? It wasn't too surprising to me. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
So is this
encouraging.
U.S. wide or where's the
Oh, good call.
yeah.
Yeah, U.S. teens. I'm sorry,
Okay.
just
Okay.
U.S. teens. Yep.
Because it's got to be different in different parts of the world.
I would assume.
Yeah.
I mean, it
Like
has to be.
South Korea probably a lot higher. You know,
Yep.
Greece probably a lot lower. Other places.
Y-
Um,
Yeah, if you want to
anyway.
check out the paper, it breaks down how they use this versus like Instagram or X or Facebook or Snapchat or YouTube, Reddit,
Yeah. Yeah.
TikTok,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. It's kind of cool. So,
Yeah. That sounds fascinating. Does it say what they use it for? Is it different?
no, it just went into frequency of usage, not into the what
Hmm.
like all these other papers do, but that's what the kids are doing, kind of getting out of pure consumer, probably schoolwork stuff. I would assume a lot of that is, but yeah, some of the other papers talked, get more into the business use cases. So we're kind of swinging the pendulum around here a little bit. There was one of them, the OpenAI one, I think is probably the most interesting. They actually,
Their paper.
yeah, it's called the State of Enterprise AI
Open that one up. It had a really
2025.
amazing graphic on the front, but I'm curious
Yeah,
what that
let's take a
means.
look. Yeah, they do all sorts of here it is.
They have the
Yeah, they
most
do
data,
this
no
kind of
doubt.
funky like this pattern thing they do on all their blog posts. So I think maybe they went with like it doesn't really look that great when I'm sharing, but if you check it out, it's pretty cool. Yeah, so they're you see what some of the key findings that they say stand out here are, but in this particular one these are some of the things that I thought was
Wait,
interesting. More than 1 million business customer users now use OpenAI's tools, the tools meaning chat and some of the other,
I,
anything you hit on the plus one.
stop
1
there and
million.
look at the first one, man.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
Message
enterprise
volume
usage.
increased by 8x,
Yeah,
and
that's the other thing
and
too. Weekly ChatGPT enterprise message volume grew about 8 times since just November 2024. Eight
and
times.
and
And
reasoning
ChatGPT,
token consumption per
yeah,
organization increased 320 times year over year.
and ChatGPT enterprise
Yeah,
seats increased about 9x year over year since they introduced it. So
yeah.
people are just gobbling this up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the more interesting
I
use
don't know. It's
case
not going
signal
to
here
catch on,
is,
Chris.
yeah, I think it's like rock and roll or designer
Yeah.
jeans.
Hmm.
It's definitely going to go away.
Because it was the
One,
same thing. I mean, from one year to designer jeans to the next, there was a 320x adoption rate.
it's
Wait,
insanity. And actually, this is I think it's maybe even more advanced and snowballing than we think, because the highest growing or fastest growing use case signal in this paper was what they described as configurable AI workflows are becoming normal. And so that's like, you and I have already talked about it. Creating a custom GPT falls into that category.
Yep.
Or, just tools where I would dare say, doing some context engineering. So, and then the last
Mm-hmm.
really interesting stat to really freak us out is they reported that weekly users of custom GPTs, which you mentioned you were using, and
Mm-hmm.
projects, which I mentioned today I'm using, have increased 19 times year to date since the publishing of this paper.
You know what I really
Uh,
want to know is what percentage of people still aren't using them? Because there's still so many people that I know that don't know
oh,
that
you
you
mean
can
people who are
customize.
aware of ChatGPT but are not aware of the customization?
Right. Yeah. Not
Great,
aware
great
of the.
question.
Yeah. 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 Anyway, well, we can ask ChatGPT.
Yeah, I have a conversation of this somewhere. So, look at this Codex engagement, 2x in weekly active users, 50% increase. Here's some
Customer.
workers. 87% of IT workers work fast, 85% of marketing, 75% of HR. Man, it's just
Yeah.
definitely a
Yeah.
really
That's a
interesting
paper.
paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got some good insights, as you can imagine. And you got to take it for what it's worth. They're
Well, I
speaking to
mean,
their
they
book.
use ChatGPT to write the paper, so 100% of that stuff's just made up, telling the researcher what they wanted to
It's all
hear.
hallucinations. They also did do a survey of 9,000 workers across almost 100 different enterprises in this paper. And a couple of interesting tidbits there were that 75% of the surveyed workers say AI improved the speed or quality of their output. So that's encouraging.
Yeah.
They also attributed
Subjective.
40 to 60 minutes saved per active day because of AI usage. I would definitely concur there. I think in the little shorthand data that I'm gathering of my own, it's
Sure.
significantly higher than that. 75% say that they can complete tasks that they previously simply could not. Now, that I think
Yeah.
is really interesting at the worker level, Matt, because I'm hopeful that from an entire business and org standpoint, we've talked about this on
Hmm.
previous pods. I think that businesses shouldn't look at like, oh, I can use AI and I don't need to have humans. I don't prescribe. I'm not.
Yeah.
That's not my
I don't get it.
message at all.
Yeah.
But I do believe that businesses can now do things they previously couldn't do with the same amount of individuals that they have, and I think there's
Right.
something really profound there.
Yeah. I kind of break it down into two categories. I still see the whole world. Everything that I think about with AI is how I can empower FileMaker customers and people that I know to use these tools in an easy way to do their job better.
Yep, that's it.
And in those two areas, really specifically, it can either save them time during the day by doing things that are rote or boring that they could otherwise do. It would just be manual and time consuming. And then
Yep.
the second category is things that they just couldn't do before. It was just not possible. Multilingual search, like a multilingual,
Yeah.
totally ridiculous, fuzzy logic is what we used to call it. Search for names where you can make whatever kind of misspelling you want for whatever, any language. That was just not possible before. And now it's trivial.
I know the speed at which things went from not possible to trivial
Yeah.
is probably the craziest of all of these. Um, Another one of the papers, I'm showing the cover page, not quite as
Yep.
sexy as the OpenAI one. This is the one that you pointed out earlier, the Harvard University
Hmm.
and Perplexity. Do you use Perplexity?
No.
I feel like that's one of the tools that the cool kids are using that I don't use. So I have it like open. I did steal something from, I'm blanking on the CEO of Perplexity's name, but I've heard him multiple times on
Hmm.
podcasts, and he mentioned one thing that I then stole the idea of and built into an actual business AI application. And that is that in Perplexity, behind the scenes, when you type in whatever your question or your query is, they then refactor that 5 times and try to ask the question better before they go do searches based on that question. I thought that was so simple and so brilliant. And if you combine that with like personal context, if you're gathering that and you're doing it in a sophisticated manner, you can now rephrase or refactor questions more accurately for what the intent of the user was than the user could even do in a lot of cases, right? Sure. Depending on their environment factor. So that was kind of cool. But this paper, there's an important word here, agents. We've talked about this before. This is a trigger, not just for me personally. One of your big
predictions. We'll talk about it.
Was it? Oh, okay, good. That's a little teaser. And of course, we're in the alleged year of the agent, so we'll have to figure out if that came true or not. But the term agent, I get a little prickly with the misuse of the term agent. I hear it a lot. And I'm not like the judge and jury of agent usage, but they did
merely
define
the executioner.
Maybe the executioner, though. I think what happens with agents is that, well, first of all, you could ask chatbots things, and you could ask chatbots to go do web searches for you before language models had the capability of reflection. And why is that important to the definition of agents? Well, agents, having it act in your agency or doing something on your behalf is not what an agent is. An agent is actually something that creates its own plan, executes against that plan, decides what tools it needs, and then it reflects back to determine whether or not that was done, which gives it autonomy, right?
Whereas the first example is merely tool use.
It's tool use, and that's fine.
And agents is one big part of tool use, or vice versa.
Tool use is one big part of agents, no doubt about it. And there was a paper that came out that I think did a decent job of providing some clarity on the industry, and it was from Anthropic, and they defined I don't think they did an amazing job of defining what agents were, but they did an amazing job of saying what LLM workflows were. And I think what that allowed people to realize is, oh, that's what I'm building. I'm not building agents. I'm building LLM workflows. I have, LLM calls at X number of times throughout a somewhat deterministic workflow. Maybe I'm using it to make the workflow somewhat dynamic, but I'm the one as the developer who determines whether it was done and what the plan is, what the steps are, and maybe a couple of the steps happen to be language models. But in true agents, they're the ones determining what steps need to be taken and what the plan is or what tools are necessary or what data needs to be gathered. And then they determine whether or not that was executed properly. And in some cases, which we've talked about in previous discussions, there's multi-agent systems, which may or may not be evolving even further in 2026, where agents are telling other agents what to do. So anyways, in this paper, they say an agent takes actions in external environments, not just using tools like web search, but other tools as well too. So in this paper, essentially what they're doing, and this was supposed to be the year of the agent. So Harvard and Perplexity. Yeah, but that might be a little scary.
No, I mean, that's actually really important.
Yeah, to the environment that the user is in, that session the user is in.
Well, to the definition of what it is, right? It's, anyway.
Yeah, super helpful. And so what they did here is they published this paper. This was just in December. They analyzed hundreds of millions of anonymized interactions with Comet. Perplexity had that AI browser come out earlier this year called Comet. And they scraped all that super valuable information. And this is what they came up with. They said that this is what people use agents or agentic experiences. I don't think the people know their agentic experiences. I think this is just another what people use chatbots for. But in the case of Perplexity, productivity and workflow were 36% of the queries. Learning and research were 20%. And together, that's about 57% of all agent usage. Productivity, workflow, no surprise. And learning and research. Those are pretty wide categories, but probably not a lot of surprises there, I'm guessing. And let's see. And then you can actually see, and within research, that breaks down into summarize and analyze research information, create and edit documents, search and filter products, and search and filter research information. So, a little bit of that extends the help me think that we saw from the earlier paper. Now that leaves us with just
I have two really big problems with that paper.
please let's go.
One of them is that they use two spaces after every sentence rather than one, which is a complete error. And second
Sorry,
of
I
all, it
stopped
was
showing
right.
it,
It
but
was right and left justified. Come on, amateur
well,
hour.
dude, they had a minimum number of pages for this assignment, so they had
Yeah,
to.
whatever. They could have just
uh,
increased the font size by 0.2%. No one would have noticed anyway.
Well, they did say something about environments, and I'm trying to unpack that a little bit. It showed that environments are where agents operate, and the top environments, help me make sense of this. They define the top environments as Google Docs was the number one environment at 11%. Email, all email services combined, tied it just at about 11%.
Okay.
LinkedIn was an environment, YouTube was an environment, and Amazon. So I'm
Yeah,
not
this
sure
makes
what to
sense.
make of that. Does it?
Well,
Okay, help
well,
me.
I mean, I use a lot of those, right? So, like in Gmail, you can. I think you and I talked about this one time. I was trying to remember a name of someone, and I couldn't. So I put in to mail, like, there's this guy I knew from a long time ago. He was really into shoes. He was all into value billing at the time, and he was a solo developer shop, but I can't remember his name for the life of me. 3 seconds later, I came up with Jonathan Stark, and I'm like, that's the guy.
Wow.
Now that
In
was just, there's
Gmail?
no possible way. Yeah, that's Gmail with its AI agent in there.
Oh,
So
I
it's
see.
it's
Okay.
great
So
at
like
some
Gemini.
things. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think the same thing. I don't actually use it with LinkedIn. That would be interesting. Um,
They have like the little rewrite this in
Google
AI
Docs, you
thing,
can
but
search.
and I'll tell you what LinkedIn clearly has, although I haven't used it myself, but most comments I get from LinkedIn are just AI written. So it has like a couple of the things that I posted about, and I think you can just turn that on to increase engagement, but it's just really obvious that the human people aren't actually writing it when they're commenting. So I would say maybe write your own holiday cards by hand, no AI there, and actually make your comments on people's stuff genuine and human. Um, the last thing on this paper, by the way, was just there was a usage breakdown: 55% personal usage, 30% professional, and 16% educational. So, professional still
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
cranking it out, but okay, one last one for you, man, and then we can move on to making our own predictions. This one's got a pretty cover to it too. Estimating AI productivity gains from Claude conversations. So as you can imagine, Anthropic did the same thing here. They
Now, see, now hold on here. This one is using the correct formatting. It's jagged justification on the right. There's only one space between. Anyway, let's go.
there was there was no, I don't want to give you PTSD. I don't want to make you nervous about this margin usage here. You guys can check it out on YouTube, but they analyzed in a privacy preserving analysis system. I love everybody's word usage here. They analyzed 100,000 conversation transcripts
PPAS,
from yeah, of course, naturally. That's gonna be one of my predictions. People are gonna start using that term.
Yeah.
They generated two core estimates for each task: time estimate without AI and a time estimate with AI. So they're really just trying to see, again, productivity gains, right? So the headline claim is pretty aggressive. They said that the time spent is reduced by about 80% on average. If you use AI, you're getting an 80% increase. They estimate that the average task would take about 90 minutes without AI. So whatever they determine their average task out of those 100,000 transcripts would take 90 minutes without AI. And I'm assuming it didn't take 90 minutes with AI. I was unable to find out the actual piece of data as to how long it took. So
was this, well, I guess the one thing, it says time estimate without time estimate with. Does that mean the estimated time after the fact or the estimated time that the person thought it would take?
I think,
Those are very different.
that's it. So they were determining what they thought it would take. So for example, someone might say, hey, help me write an email to my colleague with blah, blah, blah.
Right.
They're saying they think a human written email would take X amount of time, and then they can determine how long it actually takes.
Well, they can actually do with a large enough sample size, they can actually do it pretty good. They can get a pretty accurate result of that for different types of things.
Yeah, and I'm assuming,
That's
and they
amazing.
go very deep into the science of how they determine that. Actually, so
Yeah,
deep that
there you go.
they've already lost me. If you can see some of the yeah, so some of the example AI accelerated task, vocational, educational, post secondary, makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. Library and science, often
Financial
these are
analysts.
roles. So this is like research,
Mm-hmm.
right? Really interesting paper.
Ooh.
Claude's estimates by occupation category. Sorry. Time without AI hours. So yeah, you can see what they're basically doing for those that are now looking at this. They seem to be saying if you're in management, you can
Wow.
save 2 hours a day on AI tasks if you use AI, because it would take you 2 hours extra without AI. And that is an increase in $68 an hour in a wage, which that's an interesting way to look at it,
Yeah.
and $133 in cost and a time savings of 85%. I mean, that's insane. I mean, that's the top
Look
of the
down
chart.
that column of time savings. There's not a single one of them below. The lowest one I see is 61%. Most of them hover around 80.
That's
That's
crazy.
crazy.
Well, actually, let's look at the
Yeah.
lowest one. Transportation and material moving
Yeah, that's the
still is
lowest paid one.
79.4.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And
But
there's
it's
still
still,
an increase of $23 an hour. I mean, this is undeniable money in your pocket, especially if
yeah.
you're a small business, right?
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. So essentially, if you pull all these different reports together, people are using AI for probably some not too shocking things like searching, but advice, creating drafts,
Yep.
which everyone should create drafts. Desktop looks like work, mobile looks like life. Teens are
Mm-hmm.
building habits, which is interesting for the future. And in enterprise, they're not just using it for chatting. The custom GPTs, projects, and embedded sort of context engineering systems have a 19x growth, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Um, Agents are moving into the next step of delegation, which is often described as multi-agent systems. And productivity gains are real, but measuring them some way or another certainly matters. So
Right.
crazy stuff. Check out those papers here. I posted something on LinkedIn too. If you guys like it, give me a non-AI generated comment. And but summarize some of these things that I thought was interesting as well too. So
Yep.
I still never
All
cease
right. Let's go to
to
our
amaze.
predictions.
All right, so you're now. You want
Ready?
to frame up how you?
Oh, you're muted. Oh, I think I know why. Stop. I think when I shared my screen, I turned share sound on.
Hmm. You want to talk about your process for putting these together?
Yeah, so I did a transcript of the entire podcast we did for the year in review last year,
Cool.
and then I put that into ChatGPT and had it analyze it
And
for the
so we
predictions that
must
each
have,
of us made
yeah,
because
we
we
must
made
have said
some.
some predictions, even though we were looking backwards. Okay.
So let's see. Token windows. Actually, this one's maybe more you. You talked about token windows
Yeah,
getting larger. I think maybe we both did.
yeah,
The average
I,
token window at the beginning of 2025 was 128,000. That was like one of the biggest ones you can get. And now it's a million, 2 million.
yeah, I think though, like I'll you can take the A on that. I'll take the C because I openly made predictions about 10 million token windows
Uh,
by end of 2025, and that didn't happen.
not in the
Although,
podcast, you didn't.
yeah, no, not on the podcast. So I'll take the win when I can.
Yeah,
But
no, in the podcast, according to the actual text, you get the total A on that one.
awesome.
Yeah, A or
I'll
A
take it.
plus.
I'm not going to talk you out of that for sure.
Yeah, I talked about not predicting AGI in 2025, and
Yeah, no AGI. I'm going to give you even more credit for that. Not only did AGI not happen in 2025, and by the way, people were legit talking about
yeah,
it happening in that short of a term, but I'd go so far as to say kind of people aren't talking about AGI anywhere near as much. As a matter of fact, they've introduced the new term of
super
it's not
intelligent
AGI,
something.
super intelligence, yeah,
Yeah,
like ASI or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
So now the goalposts are moving.
Yep, as
So
they always were. I mean, the
and
Turing test has moved and moved and moved,
yeah,
because we've long passed it. Um, not to jump ahead too far, but I actually predict there's going to be a few organizations claiming to have reached AGI in 2026, but that it will not be widely accepted.
Well, and that's there, and therein lies exactly why I'm of the AGI is not upon us, because there's no accepted measure of AGI. Like
Right.
there's no one out there that says this is what AGI looks like and how we determine when it's here. And also it's not much like human cognition works and learning works. It's not a light switch. It's not all of a sudden one day, oh my God, we've achieved general intelligence. It's a frog boiling exercise on intelligence and knowledge. So I'm with you on that one. I do see one of my predictions for 2026 here in your next line. So I guess maybe.
Well, small language models I didn't actually talk about. So I think this kind of put stuff together because I was talking about that in a later conversation in this whole thing.
Okay.
So that one is actually one of my things for this year, and I'm not so sure how big they're going to be. But anyway, and then the last one is Apple, Apple Intelligence, which is really bad. So
essentially we were saying it's just not even there yet. And we were talking about how we completely turned it off. I guess that was
I still have it on, but it's just so frustratingly bad.
We already talked about it here. What it should be, the music experience we just described that someone else is now doing besides them should be super easy. And I travel with this thing all the time. Just so much of the stuff that I'm offloading to other AI tools that could just happen right on my phone. It's so frustrating.
I'll say, get directions to blah. Like there's a store called Praktiker, which is like a German store that sells hardware, like at Home Depot. And it will say, getting directions to practical North Carolina, located blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, I'm in Crete. I'm not going to drive to North Carolina. You know where I am, you know where I'm going, you know what I've previously searched before, you know the kind of things that I'm looking at, you know the previous conversations I've had, you know that I've been here before. Work really hard at figuring out what I said if you don't understand it, as opposed to assuming it's in North Carolina. It's like,
you touched on two of the trigger things for me. One is their promise of personal context could have been amazing. They could have done it better than anyone else could. And they still could do it better than anyone else could because of the trust that they have with users and their sandboxing. All of that is what I have faith in them to actually not, expose all my data to the world. I'm not as worried about that stuff as some people are, but like, you've got to be kidding me. You have every text message, you have every utterance. You're constantly listening to me. You know everything I'm doing, the way I talk, who my friends are, what I talk to them about, essentially where I go to eat, like every app interaction and intent that's in there. How dare you, Apple, not figure out how to do something with that? Because that's the type of personalized consumer experience I want to have with AI, and Apple is just not doing it.
And then when it comes to health stuff, it knows, with an Apple Watch, it knows my heart rate. It knows all the other stuff that I'm putting in there, my heart rate variability, how much I exercise, blah, 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 blah. Anyway.
Even if you're not using like the Aura Ring, it still has the app and I do, and it is critical in sleep management for me. But that app is on my device and that data is stored locally as well. So, it could be part of my personal context.
That's true. I use the Apple Watch to track my sleep. It's pretty good. Okay. So your claims, agents. You got an A on that one because they're absolutely were huge. Token window explosions. You actually did talk about that. You didn't talk about 10 million. But
it says A plus. Right. I'm going to say C because I thought in my brain it was going to be 10 million and we just never got there.
Well, I guess that's going to be coming. What's going to be happening for next year? Claris AI, which I should have been talking about more, but basically you said it was going to become much more built into the application and have a much bigger effect on users. You were totally right about that. They came out with a couple of versions.
Think about it. All we had was semantic search this time last year.
Yeah, I know. And then adding the other stuff was just huge. And now that MCP is shipping.
You gave the F on this next one.
So you said X will blow your mind. It's going to be
Oh,
huge.
well, first of all, go look at you definitely gave that F for your own personal reasons, but
No, I didn't.
go look at every benchmark out there for actual performance of models, and they're
The
I'm not
worst.
stumping for that. No, they're literally number one with a bullet in most of the reasoning categories and the categories that everybody else seems to care about.
The
And
one I
they
saw in a huge study was they were the far and away the worst for hallucination. Like 94% hallucination rate to 14% hallucination rate on some of the other ones.
94% hallucination rate. That's absolute insanity.
What I
They
saw.
That's a hallucination, dude.
Yeah, I don't know.
They moved at the time of this prediction. It was only available inside of X. Now it's a
Yeah.
completely different tool. They went from a player who was in their second generation after only a year to now their fourth
Yeah.
generation after
Yeah.
2 years, and they have the largest data centers, and they're completely crushing people on compute. They
Yeah,
can't be
but they have
ignored.
0.1% corporate uptake.
You mean, oh, you're talking about like adoption rate
Yeah,
internally?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. The adoption rate is tiny. So, I
yeah,
mean, I don't know. Maybe that will change. I'm
Oh,
still
but
going to go with
my
no.
prediction of breakout player absolutely happened. They were not even considered, and now they're
Yeah,
in the top tier of all benchmarks, and they're as a matter of fact, what happened earlier this year, where you know how like one model provider, a foundation model provider comes out with
yeah.
something, they're number one, and then 2 weeks later
Hmm.
somebody else does it.
Yeah,
Well,
of
that
course.
happened in an entire cycle
Leapfrog.
of OpenAI and Google and Anthropic, and they still didn't usurp the X model at the time. But
Hmm.
I'm not going to sit here and stump for X because I
Well,
know
I think
that's
it's
politically
worth checking out
unkind.
because it's been off people's radar for a long time, and I think because of the way you feel about it, it should be
And the
it should
tool is
become.
actually really good. The Super Grok tool has way more. Like one of the things I get frustrated with when I'm trying to build documents in a Canvas and OpenAI is they throttle the amount of tokens that the doc. Like you get to a certain point of the document and it just stops building it properly for you
Yeah.
or editing it properly because it has its own internal limit. The Super Grok tool doesn't do that. And I've been actually very frustrated with 5.1, and
Hmm.
I'm not so sure if it's fixed in 5.2 from OpenAI with a lot of model slippage and like context memory stuff issues I was running into, and I would
Yeah,
find I
and
would
the context
slip over
window
to
got
like
smaller.
I
401
think
was a
it
million
did.
tokens, and it's like 600,000 and something like that in
That's
5.2.
maybe part of what I'm experiencing
Yeah.
too, and it's much larger over on SuperGrok. So those are just, you
Hmm.
know, I don't have a single daily driver. I use ChatGPT, Claude, SuperGrok, and various other tools like Perplexity. You know, I'm going to have to move into
Yeah.
it because we
Yeah.
talked about how we use it. But
Okay.
I'm not just one tool.
Anyway, we both did great. You got dragged down by X, but I don't know. Maybe it'll happen. So I don't know. These are some of the other predictions. This part I didn't do that much work on, but basically like what thing's going to happen. So kind of my predictions are the AGI prediction.
Oh yeah.
This one this is dismal, but here's my prediction. I think that in the FileMaker world, there's so many apps, and I think there's going to just not be overwhelming adoption by clients to use it. I think there's so many thousands of small databases out there that are just chugging away for their company that by the end of 2026, they're going to go, this is great, but I haven't seen anything that my workers really need, so I'm not going to put any AI into it.
So
This is
you're
the thing that I'm
talking,
fighting most hard against.
but you're
But
talking just to frame it up specifically, adoption of AI tools in the FileMaker framework.
natively adding a
Natively.
tool
Okay. Yeah.
so that there's some API call inside of FileMaker to
Yeah.
run an AI function, summarize,
I
translate,
I'm not
search,
gonna I'm not gonna counter
create,
that at all.
analyze.
I'm gonna throw another log on your fire. I think I am actually gonna predict that FileMaker will not keep adding AI tools, but
Hmm.
instead focus on mapping outcomes to the existing tool sets that they have right now. I
Hmm.
think it's pretty evident that some of the product decision making on the FileMaker AI side has not been validated by the marketplace desires and needs, and they've gone now 2.5 cycles on that, and it's quite obvious because I think there's probably single-digit adoption of the tools that they have out there right now. Single-digit percentage adoption is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Evidenced by some of your own research that you did when you were talking to even presenters on AI topics at some of the big conferences who said they don't even have anybody. And I'm not even counting. I don't care if somebody says they use it and they tinker around with it. My question is anybody paying you to do this? Like, first of all, do you have the ability to do it so that you can confidently charge people for it? Number two, are people actually transacting on AI? And I think that's in the 0 point whatever percent adoption rate within Claris. So I think it stays well below 25%. But Claris, I'm going to be hopeful for them, will change their focus from just, t-shirt cannoning AI acronyms out into the world, because I don't know how they're deciding this. They lick their finger and put it up to the sky and, just throw something out there. They'll actually be more deliberate with this and will now communicate in plain English to people and talk about what outcomes can be achieved with these tools. And that will drive, it's just not going to be enough time to get above 25% though, to your point.
Yeah, so I totally get that. So my mission, like my goal for 2026 is to actually offer services so that if companies want to do like a proof of concept or even a fully integrated, really, really small thing, to be able to, in a few hours, meet with them, take a look at their application. I've got a big toolbox of ones that I've already done that are small. Figure one out that's the lowest hanging fruit for their application, integrate it, let some users test it, and then see what happens. It's a foot in the door kind of a thing because it's so hard and people are thinking way too big about what they're going to do.
Yes.
And it's like, oh yeah, we're going to implement AI. It's going to take over the entire thing, and you just push one button, and the whole entire thing happens. It creates a project and assigns it to people, and blah 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 blah. No, you start with something small, and then kind of get to that.
Yeah, I'll validate that by saying our process on the AI side, not the FileMaker side, but just the AI business, is we deliberately start with experiments. We just say, what small little thing, even if they go, we want this big, huge thing, we actually workflow it all out. And then what we do is we like circle little areas like, well, we got to prove that AI can do this one piece. We got to prove that AI can do this and so on and so on. And we do a bunch of different experiments. Some of them will prove fruitful, some will surprise us, some won't. And then we stitch together what we learned from all those into workflows. And they usually aren't big, huge swings. They're just little things. And I believe so strongly that, rote tasks can be eliminated with AI and users would love it. That's where every organization needs to start. And I like your methodology. We do something similar, and I think everybody should do the same thing.
Let's see.
Which, by the way, is a generic and probably unmeasurable prediction of mine. I said it in the frame. I framed it up as far as Claris was concerned. I think ROI-driven AI deployments, like where businesses shift from experimental pilots, like I've talked about, to actual projects with clear ROI. I think we will see growth of that, but it's going to take where people identify specific tasks that can be made more efficient with AI. It's just a shift in thinking. The tech doesn't have to change. It's just how people are going from, I think you actually articulated this perfectly. Stop swinging for home runs, like with, going big. Just go with the little stuff and little tiny ROI, pennies into nickels into dimes.
Get
and
a guy
so
on first. Yeah.
Yep. Get a guy on. Oh, look at that. Hashtag sports.
Not even that, right? Like, hit a ball that's coming at you and don't let it be an out.
Yep. Get on base. This is Moneyball. It's literally just
get on base, or at
AI.
least not have it be a strike that goes past you. Make contact with the ball, even if it's goes out of bounds because it's a fly. Keep with the baseball metaphor.
No, I think it's actually perfect. And so, yeah, that's what I'm hopeful for. I think that mindset shift will change. I think, I'm going to go back to one more that we already took the W on, but I want to revisit this, and that's small language models. And there's a couple of interesting things in here. First of all, this is going to become a problem because, I felt a little icky when we were talking about language models, and all of a sudden everyone just started calling them LLMs. It was a little tough for me to adopt that, but it was so clear that everyone was saying this that I just went ahead and just started calling them LLMs as well. But The first L is for large. Like it's not, and the assumption was that they were just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and pretty soon they were just going to take over the entire universe. So much so that in the brilliant and extremely well-run state of California, where I live and have my business, these geniuses came up with this. Luckily, it didn't get voted in, but they wanted to completely shut down and restrict all AI and AI-related commerce. And one of the measures was that if your models were certain parameters in size, like they were so sure that this was just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, is that they wrote what was supposed to come into law. Probably would have been a federal law, but it didn't end up taking in California. But they were assuming that everything was just going to get bigger. The interesting thing about it is the metric that they used in AB 1047, in case people want to look into it, was never achieved. As a matter of fact, what happened instead was, and it was actually this time in 2024 when that was trying to get passed. So what happened in 2025 is a lot of this was the, God, what was the China one again? Damn it, with the whale.
DeepSeek?
DeepSeek. So DeepSeek came out and distilling of models came, these processes, training of models with less compute, which is what DeepSeek really changed the game on. All of these actually were able to produce larger models with smaller processes and less compute. It doesn't mean they're using less compute. You're just going to keep doing more compute.
Yeah.
But the
More
models are
per
getting
compute.
small. Yeah. And then all of a sudden we started seeing model capabilities. I think 04 Mini was the one that really was profound for me. And that was where the first time, they were coming out with the big model and the little one, 400 billion parameters and then 7 billion parameters or something. But the 7 billion parameter ones were kind of hot garbage. You really couldn't do much with them. But then the 04 Mini came out. Maybe they're doing reasoning, or I think these were distilling the larger models. They were really capable. And so not only do I think that this is actually going to continue, it is, and I know it is, but I think the awareness of models like Llama 1B, Mistral 3B, Gemma 3B, all these are out there and available, and that's moving reasoning.
Are those
to
in the
edge.
same? Are those in a class similar to like 4.1, 4.1 nano, 5.0 nano from OpenAI?
I don't know what the billion parameters are, but the nano concept is indeed consistent with this class. They're essentially trying to move the processing requirements for reasoning off the compute onto the edge. And and one of the things that Apple has done very well, somewhat ironically, is they build excellent silicon for inference. Like our laptops are some of the most powerful inference capable machines available to consumers that aren't, like NVIDIA class chips or something like that.
Yeah.
So bringing that onto the device, and the reason I wanted to bring it up as a prediction is I hope to see it becoming more profoundly moving to the edge, but also this is how people should think about building AI systems. One of the things that I see working with clients or teams that are building products, one of the most common things I see people doing wrong is they think that the model has to do everything. Like the biggest example I can give you is, let's say you're creating an AI app, and what people will do, smart people too, and large teams of smart people will try to make it all happen with one big prompt. And they just go, well, the model is so smart. Like, 5.2 just came out.
Yeah.
It'll figure it out. No, stop doing that. First of all, sure, maybe the model is smart. Break your one prompt into as many different calls to an LLM that you need to that match your workflow. One that I looked at, for example, I was doing an analysis on somebody's monolithic prompt, which is just a really poor, short-sighted approach. And instead, it could have been broken down into about 14 different calls. And then when you start looking at those calls, you go, the way you should do it is you should try to make these calls work. First of all, as many calls as you need, break them down, the more the better. And then look at those individual calls and see if you can accomplish what that one tiny task is. Maybe this is just classifying a chunk of text, or extracting the city from something, or redacting some PII. I think you'll find that these less than 10 billion parameter mini or nano models can totally do all that. As a matter of fact, look no further than on our devices back in June, at WWDC, Apple actually announced that the foundation models were going to be available through app intents on device. So Swift application developers could actually load those models locally onto people's amazing inference machines on those cool M chips and perform little things. Now, the problem is the token windows are only 4,096 tokens for the windows for those models. Yeah. So most people who think it's all about t-shirt cannoning AI acronyms into foundation models is the way to do it, they would think, well, I can't do anything with that. Oh, no, I think if you break your things down, your processes down enough, it can absolutely handle most things that you're doing, and then you leave the big calls to the cloud for the foundation models. So anyways, your thoughts on that approach?
No, that makes sense. And that's one of the things, again, that Apple, I guess they were talking about doing it, but that they're really good in a good position to do. And I think really it's their commitment to privacy just was such a huge limiting factor. Because Google and other ones just don't care about it.
Yeah, there's definitely some yellowing going on.
And it's the reason to stick with Apple in a lot of ways because of that. And then just run the ChatGPT app on your phone, which works perfectly.
I am holding out hope that they will be able to leverage that somehow. So
yeah, what it might be like tool use. If they open up a bunch of the tools on the phone for that, like for example, the music one I was talking about, it can create a playlist, so you can have a conversation about a bunch of stuff, and then at the end you can say, okay, make a playlist, and then you push a button and poof, you have a new playlist in Apple Music that's from then on there that you can then use for whatever you want. But what it cannot do is edit an existing playlist because privacy. So I think we're going to see, some other stuff like that. But what it's not going to be able to do is like read all my emails and find something, maybe. Well, I don't know.
If it's on device in the sandbox, I don't care if it's accessing that information. I just don't want to expose that information to the outside world where it's unnecessary. But if it goes and finds out, like it reads every text message I've ever sent to my wife since I got an iPhone,
sure,
cool.
That'd be so great.
I don't care.
God, if I could say, there's this thing that I sent a couple years ago. It was a picture of a blah. I find it. I can't find it because you're never going to find it. And like the text search thing, like you have that right now, it's just useless to try to find it.
Oh my God.
It'll find a word, but then if the conversation was above or below that, forget it, you can't.
Just at least employ semantic search across the device on an OS level.
Yeah.
That would
so,
be
but I mean, I don't know. So these things have to be coming. Have you tried the language translate function? The real-time language translation?
AirPods?
Yeah.
I haven't, but I'm only because I haven't had opportunity to, but
it's cool.
I mean,
it's cool for sure.
I can imagine.
Greek is not one of the languages, though. I think it supports like just 3, like Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian or something. Very, very few.
Well, check any box, Apple. Keep doing what you're doing.
I know.
I'll throw one last one out for predictions, only because I feel like, why hasn't this happened already? Voice. I just can't believe that voice has not just completely dominated. The models are there. The tech is there. The support is there from a silicon standpoint and a device standpoint. Yep. I think there's the one profound limitation for voice adoption at work is the cubicle effect. It's the like, you don't want to have people hear you say this, but I think that's probably offset by the fact that like fewer people are working in offices than ever before. So one would think this is the right time for talking out loud to your device. But, I found it as a user, I on dog walks, I ramble on for 45, 50 minutes or something,
Absolutely.
And it's just easier. I'm not a good typist. I never overcame typing. So hunting and pecking my thoughts is not as easy as just saying them. And the transcription technology is where it needs to be. I just where is it? Right. So, I I don't know. A big change will have to happen somewhere for that, but I
Yeah,
don't know, I'm
totally.
predicting maybe that's
Well,
2026.
it's almost impossible to type as fast as you can talk unless you're using a court reporter machine. And those can easily get up to a
And you're a
couple hundred
court
words.
reporter.
Well, yeah, trained
And-
on it, of course.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, so yeah, I'm a very good typist and fast, and there's no way I could keep up with something. But at least it's not frustrating for me. Um,
Yeah, it
the
is for
typing.
me, and
Yeah, I
I
totally
for
get
one
that.
I'm here for voice,
Yeah,
certainly.
I get that. And you know, when I don't know if you knew this, when you read, like if you just pick up text and read it, you're sub-vocalizing what you're reading. It's just a built-in part of your brain.
Oh,
Parts of your mouth are moving as you read words on the
some
page.
people's
I
more than
think
others.
everyone, yeah, but I think it's a thing. So why couldn't there be an AI thing, a little sensor on your neck or whatever?
Well, who knows? Maybe that OpenAI device that Johnny Ive and
Yeah,
Sam
yeah, yeah.
Altman
So
are
I mean,
promising will
this
do
means like
that.
if you're just thinking, like if I think out loud, I just thought a sentence to you, and I
Yeah.
could feel my mouth moving. So I could be sitting in my cubicle, and if there was a device that could actually track that,
Well,
we
they
have
have.
these.
I mean, you see the crazy tech that's coming out with the brain implants, and
Yep.
people are able to like send
Oh
messages and
yeah.
play video games. Like, there's
Yeah.
a connection there. I mean, that's the fastest way to get a
And that's
command.
with
But
hardly any resolution, like the number of
man,
electrodes to the brain, like 1024. But imagine, a million.
millions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
some other way to do
I'm
that.
definitely here for that as well. So do you have another prediction you want to throw out there?
Gosh,
Since
predictions.
voice was my last one.
Yeah, that's a big one. Um, what I really am interested in, uh, the two categories that I'm interested in are the ones that are going to be surprising and they're going to hit us, and the ones that we really want that are just not going to happen yet.
Hmm.
Okay, a big one is the dishwasher robot. So it turns out to be really, really hard for a robot to take dishes from a sink, put them in the dishwasher, wash them, and then unload them without breaking them. You would think that would be
Like just an
easy,
arm,
but it is
basically.
absolutely not. There are not. If you do actually a big search on it, you're
Somebody
not going to find a
described
bunch of
that
stuff.
as physical AI, by the way.
Yeah.
I've been hearing people talk about the
Okay.
distinction of,
Physical AI. I like that.
robotics and whatnot. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
So that's coming because almost everyone would identify that. I think I heard a thing today. Like number one on the list was a dishwasher robot, and the very, very last one on the list was a present opener. Like
oh
a Christmas package unwrapper. Like nobody wants that.
no, that's the one time you do want to do labor.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Actually,
precisely
right?
that's precisely what I'm saying. But
Yeah,
but
I like
nobody
that.
wants to load and unload dishes. And so if and there will be that will
Especially
happen,
my
but I don't think
wife.
it's going to be 2026.
No, but I'm here for it. Then of course
Yeah.
just they have to get the price points down so that
Yep.
everybody can have it.
Yep.
And it's the whole like when a tech is in a rental car, then everybody's got it. Like,
Yeah.
when unloading, self-loading and unloading washers can happen inside rental apartments, then it'll actually have an impact on society. Otherwise, it'll be like a bougie rich people thing. But whatever. I would like to
Yeah,
strive to be
I don't
one of
know.
those people someday.
It's kind of shocking. I was a couple minutes late to our meeting today because I was putting together an exercise bike that I bought for
Oh,
the house, and it's actually fairly high tech and cool, and it was 180 euros.
oh,
So I mean,
wow.
if you could think about something with that much technology, a screen, a magnetic, device for setting your tension, um, and all of the other hardware.
Yeah,
And obviously, a
AI
dishwashing
robotics.
robot's going to have a lot of other moving parts, but why would it? With manufacturing, that could be under $1,000.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, look no further than the fascinating example of Flippy, the burger flipping robot, which is, of course, just an automated arm. Flippy actually has
I vaguely remember that.
yeah, Flippy is the one where when it first came out, I don't know the actual dates, but if you look them up, it's actually even more fascinating when you look at the timeline of this. But they said, hey, franchise burger
Hmm.
joints,
Hmm.
reduce your costs by
Hiring Flippy.
insane amounts by having Flippy back there just flipping burgers, right? And none of them wanted it because it was all just such bad PR and it was a bad look and everything. And then, fascinatingly, like in some jurisdictions and municipalities, minimum wage rates went from
4 to 15.
I don't know. To like 20 and 25, right? And so, and it hits those organizations the hardest. And so then in California, they did like a $20-something one, and Flippy the Burger Flipping Robot just like took over all the franchises in California. So they finally were able to say, well, look, this is the only way I can still make a burger for $4.99, right? Like I have to figure this out. And it flips burgers. And so when it economically makes sense, then I think the factors have to make it make sense and politically make sense, and just, not just be trying to eliminate humans, I guess, like whatever, all those factors have to kind of come together for the tech to actually take place. So I think it's fascinating to see that it goes beyond just the development of the hardware, but the environment has to be good for it too.
Well, I mean, it's eliminating a job of flipping burgers, but I'm not sure who really wants that job. Like, even if it's in food, I think there's more important things. Like maybe there'll be less staff in the restaurant, but the staff that's there is going to be doing things that are more core to the function of the restaurant and they're going to be able to spend more time taking care of guests,
Yeah, I think there's certainly some truth to that. And then also it does keep burger prices down. Yeah. And unfortunately, the communities that are most impacted by wages are also the ones that will turn to places like that to feed their families. And so, you don't want to ironically displace them because you've now made burgers $12.99.
Right.
So Flippy's here to save the day. Flippy's feeding families is what I'm getting at. Basically.
What about if there was a like a gas station that used robots to fill your car with gas, assuming you still have a gas guzzling car? What do you drive? You drive a Suburban, right? With a V12.
I drive a gas guzzling car. I'm holding on tight to my gas guzzling car. But I don't know. I'm fond of all the electric car technologies. I test drove a Rivian this year before going back to a gas guzzling, baby dinosaur killer. But I think on the horizon, I can't imagine, even though I'm stubborn and nostalgic with cars, that I'm going to not be in an electric car.
I totally get that. Over here, they charge a significant tax by the size of the motor. So if the engine is like 1.1 liters or less, it's almost free. 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, it kind of goes up and up and up. Our car is a 1.3 liter diesel. It gets like 54 miles to the gallon.
Well,
if you get like a V8 Range Rover, it's like $3,000 or $4,000 a year. But if you get a really small car, it's like $300 a year for registration.
Well, if that was working, like we said, model development and training was, it should go the other direction. It should like force the model creators to be able to create the same torque with less liters of a smaller liter engine.
Isn't there like a really small Formula One car? I don't even know, like a less than 2 liters with crazy turbocharger and 600 horsepower or something like that. I mean, you can get the power out of it. So
it runs on pure grain alcohol or something like that. Is part of the challenge. But
anyway,
but I think all of this goes into physical AI prediction. I like what you're talking about there. Maybe we start to see this happen on a consumer level. This, by the way, is an area where I think Apple could pop their head back up and be relevant into smart home with tiny little devices and maybe a better.
They make hardware,
Yeah, but that's it. That's the thing. Like if
they make integrated hardware is what they make.
Yeah, integrated hardware with their great silicon and someone else's AI. Actually creating improved HomeKit and kind of boil in some of the promise of HomeKit with actual like really good AI grade hardware.
I'm going to make an app for Apple Flippy, like an Apple silicon based burger flipper.
I'm sure it can be done with IoT and some level of AI at the present, but
I just think it's hilarious.
Now I'm getting hungry. Now I need an omelet flipping Flippy. So here we are. Is it New Year's Eve?
What are your predictions? No, it's not quite. It's just
no, those are my predictions. I think there's another level of SLMs, and I believe that actually it's going to get really awkward because this whole LLM terminology and SLMs are going to be so profound that we're going to not be able to use either term, and we're just going to back to LLMs. And then voice was the other part that I was predicting there too. And then Claris, I'm saying no more AI stuff, actually. That's a big swing, that they're actually going to just try to learn how to actually message and listen to their customers more about what outcomes they want, and then map the stuff they already have to those outcomes.
I'm going to say you're wrong about that one. I think we're going to see a bunch of stuff in FileMaker. And I have, by the way, I'm not on the inside track for beta for any of this stuff. I just know kind of what I want.
There's currently no beta right now for anything that hasn't been released. So this is a good time to make predictions.
I think we're going to see some AI that helps for creating the database, like some AI tools for the developer to write scripts, write calculation codes, check type stuff like that. It's a pretty big issue for script writing because scripts are under the scene like a really specific XML, and you can't. It's not text-based like all the other programming languages.
Well, I'm factoring those. I'm factoring in those limitations into.
But I know they're working on it, and since it is under the hood XML, and XML is something that can be dealt with in a really effective way, I think they're going to be able to put some. I think they're going to be able to construct and some sort of an AI tool that would allow it to work, where you can say, take this section of my script code and make it work for these 3 new variables, and poof, the new steps will appear. Or check this script and find out what logic are, or something like that. Or even write a script that does this, and it will look at and understand all of the other scripts in the solution. And I think those things are coming. I don't know if they're going to be in 2026. I also think we're going to see some other tools like RAG, for example, is hard right now. It doesn't. You can't really do it like directly built into the application.
Not made easier by their RAG tool either.
Yeah. But
RAG
I mean,
is hard.
But there's no reason that they can't actually store some of that stuff directly in the database. Like so you don't have to go out to another service provider, where that can be a different way to do it. I don't think they've. I've been thinking a lot. Gosh, I'm trying to think of some of the other things that for prediction.
Well, I think those
stuff.
are both areas they should have started in.
Yeah.
Actually, I think focusing on Dev Assist would have been the move.
Yeah.
Out of the gate.
Okay, MCP.
Okay.
Maybe we talked about this before.
Well, we had an entire episode. If people haven't seen it yet, we had Louis De La Parra on here giving us all the details.
Big listenership. I'm not sure how much I got into it. Maybe I did a little bit. About some of my questions. MCP doesn't really have much impact for any FileMaker developer who just works in FileMaker, like if they just write code. MCP is basically huge for all the other stuff coming in.
Well, actually, it's even narrower than that.
Yeah.
It's profoundly impactful only for those that are communicating with language models outside of their FileMaker application.
And that need to reach into FileMaker.
Well, it could go both. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Right. The thing that's currently out there right now is the ability to reach into FileMaker. That's correct. But, you could also leverage MCP if you were connecting to it. But currently in market, in beta, by the way, we should note that what we showed and Louis came on to talk about is simply beta. It's not like the last of the MCP.
We'll shipping now.
Changes, right? Yeah.
It's not a big push. You have to go looking on their website for it.
Yeah, well, that I think is intentional. Someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, by the way, that's not actually, it's beta is what that is. And I'm like, well, maybe fix that messaging. No, it doesn't actually. Yeah. So I predict there will be some, there's my predictions for January. I think they're going to be tweaking their messaging on MCP for FileMaker.
Anyway, my point is that to make it useful for a regular FileMaker developer, they could open up some kind of a flavor of MCP to a database that then your scripting or your own AI queries can use that tool and that standard. So in other words, you could have, because it actually understands the context of your database, right?
Well, so I'll zoom in a little bit on that exact example because you're totally onto something. The first thing is MCP, outgoing MCP, meaning applications, an MCP client connecting to MCP servers, isn't just to connect to data. It's not even just to connect to data and or actions. It can be anything. As a matter of fact, you gave a great example of an MCP-based context management or memory system that you can then integrate in using the standard protocol and provide memory or statefulness to your own applications, like let's say FileMaker, and like a million other things you can do. Like if you just go search some of these MCP directories, you'll be blown away by some of the stuff that you can actually connect to and bring into your applications. It's I would say it's a level above API endpoints because of the context and awareness
different,
that you're able to bring into it.
It's different. It's a little bit harder maybe, but it's vastly more powerful, definitely.
Yeah. And we're,
I
think, still in
that directly affects the FileMaker developer in terms of what they want to reach out to for all these other thousands of things you can do.
Yep.
But I still think that there has to be a path where a FileMaker developer can solve some problem in their own scripting and their own work on their own database to make an MCP call to another FileMaker database in the organization, basically kind of a look back in. I think there's a lot of power there that they haven't, I haven't thought about. I thought about it quite a bit, but I think there's still more down that road. And that would really affect. So it doesn't need to be there, right? It doesn't necessarily have to do that.
But that's the thing, like MCP, without the model, the context isn't as meaningful. Then it's just a connection using a protocol. So there's definitely value in the C and the connection part of it, but the C being context and M being model.
Yeah,
you need both. Well,
the MCP server though, that you connect to FileMaker, and you publish a set of tools and data and stuff like that.
Yeah, you technically make your FileMaker databases an MCP server using this toolkit.
And it can actually then query and understand not only the data, but also structure about the data. Like, you can ask questions about what, tables and fields and...
Well, but you have the opportunity to also provide your own description of what that context is and how it is meaningful, and to help make those... interactions more meaningful to your users. So that I think is, and so like when we talked to Louis, they mentioned that like the standard MCP protocol has little description field, and how that's fine. It's certainly better than just connecting to an API endpoint without a description field. But if you really want to, you can load an entire like prompt template or like a schema description of that data source as part of the MCP connection into that context. And now you get like super relevant, very hyper-focused connections to data, and that could certainly benefit.
And there's not a FileMaker script step that says, tell me about this database.
Yeah, interesting.
And so I think that's actually one of the big things you can do.
Okay.
And there's not a FileMaker script step that says, call this other tool in the database to do this action that's an AI type action. And of course, you do need an LLM for that. But I think that part, it's reaching out and back in and taking advantage of this really amazing feature to do things that are now really difficult to do in FileMaker for just regular old FileMaker scripting. I don't know if there's there, but anyway, it's something I fantasize about. Okay.
Well, we won't add that to the predictions. That's just the wish list. How's that? There's different things there. Well, we certainly did it. I think it's probably almost midnight now in Greece.
It's only 20 after 7, man.
Oh, okay. My math is off a little. Yeah. But we did it. Another year of talking about AI. It's always fun for me to do this with you. I looked forward to this being sort of the one thing I was doing this week that was productive. But yeah, we'll check back in a year on these predictions. We'll certainly kick off the new year. We've got some things we're thinking about doing. Nothing set in stone
yet.
We'll have
two or three podcasts between now and the year end 2026.
Yeah, at least 2 of them. Whenever something relevant comes out, we'll have a podcast. So maybe 2 podcasts in the coming year. But
earth-shaking.
I look forward to it. Maybe we'll be able to call back to some of these predictions as they unfold throughout the course of the year. So, as always, it's been my pleasure to sit and talk with one of my favorite people about my favorite topic, and I look forward to many more of these moving forward.
All right. Hi, Alexi. Bye, Alexi.
Happy New Year, Alexi.
All right.
Cheers.
Happy New Year to everyone. Bye.